Namaste, my name is Amish Tripathi and I'm the director of the Nehru Centre, London. Now, some may think of Nehru Centre as just this beautiful fine building, and it is a fine building, no doubt. We have a wonderful art gallery out here. We have an awesome auditorium on the first floor with a capacity of 100 to 120 people right here in the heart of central London in Mayfair. But the Nehru Centre is a lot more than this fine building. The Nehru Centre is also an online platform. We are available on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram and on YouTube. And so the Nehru Centre is actually wherever you want it to be. Of course, we'd love for you to come to the physical events that we organize out here when we do organize them. But do join all our online platforms as well. This is a hybrid world. We are going to have offline physical events and online events as well. So do join our online platforms and do keep giving us feedback of what you think of it. We'd love to host you out there. We'd love to hear what you think of our events, and do keep sending in your suggestions as well. We do keep imbibing and learning from the feedback that you give to us to give you programs that you guys might enjoy. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Namaste. Jai Hind. Namaste. We are gathered here to launch this wonderful book, and I had the honor and the pleasure of reading a pre-release copy of this book. It's by Arun Krishnan. It's called Battle of Vathapi, Nandi's Charge. Utterly loved this book, loved it so much that I actually gave a recommendation for it, and we are delighted to now launch this book at the Nehru Centre. The author will be joining us, and a friend of mine will be in conversation with him. And if I can read out their introductions before I leave it to Anand. Dr. Arun Krishnan has studied and lived in different cities across India, USA, Singapore and Japan before putting down roots in Bangalore, Bengaluru. He started off with a degree in engineering and a doctorate and went on to work in IT, high-performance computing, bioinformatics, computational biology and HR analytics. This guy is high IQ. He has worked at various corporations, research institutes, and also in academia as an assistant professor of computational biology. And then, just to shake things up, Arun went for an MBA and turned entrepreneur. He's a polyglot and is conversant in Tamil, English, Hindi, Bengali, Japanese, and Kannada. He loves to sing and plays the guitar, keyboard, and percussion instruments. Arun, we should jam sometime. I was the singer of our band in Calcutta. He's also an amateur historian and enjoys visiting historical places. While he has over 50 articles in journals, conferences, and book chapters, this is his first work of fiction, his debut novel. Absolutely loved it. Brilliant one. And to be in conversation with Arun Krishnan is someone equally, if not more high IQ, Anand Ranganathan. Anand Ranganathan obtained his BSc Honours degree in chemistry from St. Stephen's College, Delhi, after which he left on a Nehru Centenary Scholarship for Cambridge, UK, where he obtained his BA Tripos in Natural Sciences, his MA and his PhD. After a postdoctoral stint at Cambridge, Anand returned to India to join International Centre for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, Delhi, where he ran his lab for 16 years. In 2015, he joined the Special Centre for Molecular Medicine, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, as an associate professor. His laboratory works in the area of directed evolution and pathogenesis, with special emphasis on tuberculosis and malaria. Anand is a consulting editor and columnist for Swarajya magazine. He's written previously for News Laundry, DNA, and the News Minute. Anand has written 3 books, all novels: The Land of the Wilted Rose, For Love and Honor, and The Rat Eater. These were published by Rupa, Bloomsbury, and Juggernaut, respectively. And most importantly, my late father, who was a brilliant scientist, he'd actually spoken to Anand once, and he told me Anand is among the most brilliant scientists he's met. From my late father, who was very stingy with compliments, that is one big compliment. Anand, over to you. If we can bring Arun Krishnan and Anand Ranganathan on stage, please.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, Arun. Thanks so much, Amish, for that really warm introduction. I'm really not worthy of it, but I have to say that if no, actually you are. Please wait for my secondary introduction of you, Arun, because if I thought that I was impressed by you, I did not know the what Amish rattled out concerning you. It's just it's a real honor to be launching your book. But before that, I have to say that thank you so much, Amish, for that very kind introduction. Amish is a real dear friend, and the kind of things that he's done in the fields of arts, especially, and this is away from his brilliant writing, especially the things that he's done for the Nehru Center, is really quite remarkable. And one may have thought that COVID might have dimmed the prospects, but absolutely not. The last 2 years, in fact, if not, the Nehru Center has in fact arranged for more concerts and performances and book launches than it did before COVID. So I think that proves the resoluteness of Amish. Secondly, it is with a tinge of sadness that I got to know, in fact, a few months ago, that Amish's dear father, was absolute a genius as a scientist, passed away, and I've had the real pleasure and honor to have interacted with him. And there is a company that has been founded on his discovery and invention, and I wish it all the best. So, Amish, you're right, except it's the other way around. It is I who was deeply impressed and inspired by your father. And now let me come to Arun, because Arun, I want to ask you: is there anything that you haven't really done? Because I did not know, I did not know that you play the guitar as well. I mean, I knew that you're an engineer, you're a scientist, and now you're an author. We'll come to that. But what kind of moves you to go from one terrain to the other?
I get bored easily.
Yes,
So
I guessed as much.
that's my so I used to be in computational biology, and
Yes,
I was doing my own research. I had my research group. I guess every 6 or 7 years I get bitten by this bug to change things around. So
right.
and it's been 7 years now since I started up. So I don't know. So maybe the debut novel came at the right time. Uh,
Yes.
so yeah, it's just this constant need to try and explore something different.
Right. So there is one domain that you haven't really entered as yet. I think you will soon, that of politics. But we'll leave that for now.
I would make a very bad
No, you
politician,
don't.
Anand. I would people who speak their mind,
There is no
people
such
who
thing as
speak
a bad politician. Please remember that.
no, people who speak their minds don't really make great politicians, right? I somehow doubt you would make a very good politician, but
No, well, the people who speak their minds, they stop speaking their minds the moment they enter politics. So that's a different
uh,
domain. But anyhow, I think it is time now for us to e-launch your book, Arun. So if we can do that, if I can request Nehru Center to please launch Arun's book, please.
thank
Heartiest
you.
congratulations. We live in a
Thanks for that.
wired e-world, Arun. So,
Yeah,
but so if I can begin with, so we have roughly about an hour, I think, if I'm not mistaken, for this to and fro of question and answers, and it's a real delight. And I have a set of questions that I have prepared to ask you, Arun. But I think we leave the last, I think, 10-15 minutes for the audience as well, who would be watching. And thank you so much, for joining in. So we'll leave the last 10-15 minutes, Arun, if you don't mind, to the audience's
sure,
questions.
sure.
So this is Nandi's charge, and this is Arun's book, and I've been fortunate enough to write a quote for it at the back. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It really doesn't feel, Arun, as if this is your debut book. So let me begin by asking that how many years have you toiled for this?
The book, I started this book about 10 years ago. It doesn't mean I toiled for 10 years. It just means I wasn't focused enough to write it all up at one go. I think over the years, I must have written about 100 pages or so. And I just left it at that. I just could not. I actually hit the proverbial writer's block, believe it or not. So there was one point in the story where that's it. I just didn't know how it would proceed, and I gave up at that point. So as it happened, one day I was on Twitter, and Sankrant Sanu, who founded Garuda Prakashan. So he had put something up, and I had asked him, whether they would be interested in a book like this. He said, "Why don't you go to the website and just drop the manuscript in." So I did that, and then I didn't hear back anything from them. I forgot all about it, and 3 months later, somebody from Garuda Prakashan called me up and said, "Hey, we are ready to publish if you are ready to finish the book." And then I think I typically like working with deadlines. It's been that way since college, I guess. If there's a deadline, I'll make sure I finish my stuff on time. So the actual heavy writing what happened last year. I started on Jan 1st, and I had given myself a deadline of March 31st, and I'd promised Garuda that I would get the first version of the draft manuscript out to them by March 31st, and 3 months I finished the book.
No, that's wonderful. And before I come to some other questions regarding why the subject, why historical fiction, I have to also let the audiences know that it's wonderful that Amish, gave the introduction, Arun, to your book and to this event, and it's wonderful that it's being launched, under the auspices of the Nehru Center, which is led by Amish, because Amish, as you know, in fact, he spearheaded in more ways than one the genre in India, and he wasn't as lucky as I would say. Things have changed a lot. Now you have wonderful publishers, and Sankrant is one wonderful publisher. But during his days, I mean, he had to really struggle because there was a very small clique of publishers who would, as almost like incestuous, if I can use that word, would only read the manuscripts that they were given to read, and it was a very small club. And here was something that I think it's the Immortals of Melu was his first book, Amish's first book, and no one would publish it. And then he, I think, self-published it, and he took it to the publishers. But before that, he took it to. It helped that he had a MBA. So do you. So he could see the future, at least, first couple of years. How is this going to pan out? I mean, he had the idea. Nobody had done what he had done before to that scale, to garner interest of the audience, of the readers. So he knew he had a winner on his hands. And then he took out, if I'm not mistaken, the first chapter. He photocopied the first chapter and he left it on the kiosks or the reception counters of bookshops, various bookshops, And one thing led to the other, the word of mouth, so on and so forth. And then he found a literary agent. And then he found the publisher. And the rest is absolutely history. And now I think I can speak, and I think the publisher won't mind my saying so, that Amish alone, I would say, runs the whole the publishing house as far as India is concerned, in the sense that his books directly or indirectly support the publishing of at least, I would say, 100, 200 authors of the publishing house. So I think what I'm trying to say is that things have certainly changed. There are very many avenues open. But did you find that you had to struggle, or were you overawed by, because as a debut author, I think that's the first thing that is the most, thing that awes you and is like you're scared by. That's all very well that I can write and, I have a winner in my hands and I can write a book, but will somebody publish it? Will somebody read it? Were you at all concerned or overawed by or anxious by that prospect?
So before I answer that, let me just go back to your point about, Amish almost single-handedly sustaining the careers of so many authors, right, in India.
Yes.
Truth be told, it was the Meluha series which actually prompted me to write, all those years ago. So when I read Meluha, I'd always been in love with the whole Sindhu Saraswati civilization and the Mohenjo-daro, that area. And so when I found how beautifully he had actually merged our Puranas and our Itihasas with certain archaeological events, findings and so on, that was one of the key impetuses for me to start writing, because I'd always had this, okay, you know what, I have this one book in me, maybe, like they say everybody has, so let me also do something. So actually his Meluha series was a huge impetus for me to write. But coming to your question, I think there was an implicit fear, which is probably also, which explains my lack of effort over 10 years to not finish the book. Right? Because I was always skeptical, okay, yeah, I'll write it and then I have to look for a publisher, etc., etc. But sometimes they say that things happen at their time. So maybe, with Garuda Prakashan coming in and everything, it just happened for me. Having said that, I've also been told by a couple of things I want to point out, right? One is how, even people like you and Amish and Vivekji and Ashwin Sanghi, you took the trouble to read the manuscript of an unknown author. You need not have done it, but you folks did it. And I think I'll eternally be grateful for that. And I hope that if I ever make it, in future, that I pass it forward to others who come after me in that sense. So that to me was huge.
But if I can interrupt you, I think that it goes in the territory of our training, Arun, wouldn't you say? Because as scientists and engineers, we're not even paid to peer review the papers that we get, right? It's almost as if we are expected to do it. So you have so many papers have come to you, papers that have possibly made history, and they have been really great discoveries. And you have peer reviewed them. You have gone through them in detail. You suggested many things. So it's a rites of passage, I would say. For a scientist and an engineer.
Fair enough, but I think it's still.
So I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I mean, thank you, but it was.
But it's important to acknowledge the help that you get, right? And the fact that so many people went out of the way. I mean, look, even just to reach out to you, Anand, for example, let me just talk about you because we are in this conversation. There were folks who helped me. I mean, I got in touch with you through Twitter because somebody on Twitter who I knew you. It's just that everybody, and one thing I realized, and I've realized through my entrepreneurial journey as well, is if you ask for help, more often than not, people will help out.
Right.
So I'll just be grateful for all the folks who've done that. So to me, it wasn't. I think the fear, as somebody said later on, is you can get your book published, but the real work starts after that. And it's like any other product; it has to be marketed. And so so that's kind of. And Omicron, I was supposed to actually be roaming around different cities with book launches, physical book launches, face to face, but Omicron kind of put a stop to that, bunged a spanner in the works. But hopefully, once next month, maybe post the second week, I should be starting to make those rounds.
That's wonderful. So you would be competing with Chinese scientists. Hopefully, they won't come up with some other variant to release it to the.
Absolutely.
Fingers crossed.
No, but don't get me started on Chinese scientists.
So coming back to the book, Arun, what prompted you to keep the theme as historical fiction? Because it is, I mean, especially I ask as for a debut author, you always collecting material that is around you, that almost you've lived in that material. And it is very natural for your first book to be that material. I mean, Naipaul has written about it very beautifully, that, he dreaded running out of material. So he, went to, that is how he became a travel writer, because you need material. He's always like obsessed about, I need material. So you had your material. which is around you. So you could have developed a story which was about contemporary India, about a family life, about why go back to 7th century. Was it because you said partly you were also inspired by Amish, or was it something else that was inside you subconsciously?
I actually never thought of writing a contemporary tale. That thought never even entered my mind. I'll tell you why I picked historical fiction. A few reasons, okay? One, I was always interested in history. Not in school, okay? Don't ask me about the history we are taught in school. I think we both are of the same mind on that. But post school, like everybody else, we read up on Alexander Dumas and Victor Hugo and the like. One of my biggest influences was Kalki Krishnamurti, the great Tamil novelist. So he was a huge. When I read his Ponniyin Selvan and Sivagamiyin Sabadam and all, that had a huge impact on me. Apart from that, I'll tell you a couple of instances where my father's side of the family hails from Tanjore. Yes. And so every time we used to go to Tanjore, we used to go to the Brihadishwara, the big temple, as it's called, yes. Right? And since I can remember, every time I've been there, I've had this. Look, I'm a rationalist. I don't believe in out-of-body experiences or anything, but there's this weird sense of deja vu that I get when I go there, as if I've been here before, and I can almost. The thought that Rajaraja Chola walked these same steps or stones that I am walking yes. on now. That was just an incredible feeling for me. The second incident that I wanted to talk about was when we had gone to visit Hampi, my wife and I. We spent a long 3 days there, and I remember we had taken this book with us on the Vijayanagara Empire, and at the back of the book were two eyewitness accounts. One by Domingo Paez, and then the other one was by Abdul Razak, if memory serves me right. And I know we were reading Abdul Razak's account of where he was witnessing this entire grand spectacle of, I think it was a Dashara festival or something. And my wife and I were trying to figure out, based on the description, where Abdul Razak must have been standing. And we kind of kept going and said, at one point we said, you know what, where we are standing right now is most probably where Abdul Razak spent his time, or he stood when he witnessed it, 400 years ago. And that thought again was just incredible for me. So in a sense, I wanted to write about a period in time. So that's two. The third most important aspect is I was just I was just amazed at how little of our own history our people know, right? In terms of just the way we've been taught, and very heavily influenced again by someone like Sanjeev Sanyal, who in his wonderful books talks about, Lasit Barfukan and all of those who we've never heard of or before. He brought it to our attention. So I wanted to write something. About South India, because in the history that we are taught, it's very Delhi-centric, as you know. And, the Cholas maybe get one paragraph, Pulikeshi might get 2 sentences, and that's about it. And so I wanted to write about a period in time and a region which is not very well known. Right. Plus, there are a lot of folks who write a lot about from our itihasa, right? Folks like Amish. And there are so many authors who take, let's say the Mahabharata, and they write wonderful stories about it. My knowledge of the itihasas and Puranas is very, very abysmal. So, I thought, let me stick to what I do know a little bit about. And that's how I kind of ended up in this genre.
So the interesting bit is, like, as you said, or as I was perplexed by why you've ignored the contemporary material and gone for historical fiction. What is revealing in your answer is that that itself also is your material, because your father's side is from that place. You've written about that place. You've been intrigued by the the Chola Empire and the amazing temple and everything. So it's not quite something which is unknown to you. It is in fact your material, which
yes.
yeah.
True,
So
very true.
in that aspect, having said that, you also, I mean, all through the book there are a lot of non-historical characters. So just as I don't know, I mean, it did strike me. Are those you people that you know in real life? Have you suffused them in the book so that they might read maybe 5 or 10 years down the line and say, "My God, this is me." Has that happened with you?
No, I can't say it's been any one person, but
Right.
you kind of you've written 3 books, Anand, right? You know that there's a little bit of you in every character, correct?
Yes.
As an author, there's a little
Yeah.
bit of the author in every character.
Absolutely.
There's also little bits of folks you have met over time,
Correct.
and some little aspect of it comes out through each character.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any character that I've consciously modeled on anybody I know fully. That
Right.
is not, that hasn't happened.
But
Yeah.
is there someone who your relative, your wife, or someone who's landed up in your book?
Do you? My wife's listening in. Do you really want me to answer that? No. No. Well, some
Because
of, let's say
I mean, of course, we know that in films, I mean, Hitchcock was well known for that. Even in books, I mean, right in front of me, the name is there, John Fowles, his French lieutenant's woman. He very famously comes on and boards a bus, in that thing. It's real thrilling. So sometimes it can be really thrilling um, to see the author, in fact, literally board the bus of a book and come on board. Did you ever feel that, look, this is all the historical fiction is all very well, but let me also get in a few characters who I know personally, and and I don't mean to prod you to a
no,
great extent to reveal
so
something that you don't want to, but it's just as it's an
so
interesting thought, isn't it?
let me put it this way. So there is one character who is who's a woman character, who's Sangamitra, who's very smart and
Yes,
intelligent,
correct.
and spunky. A lot of quite a bit of that has come because I think my wife is like that.
Right.
Okay. Now she's listening in, so I'm going to get a lot of credit points for it. But I'm not saying it because she's listening in. So a
Yes.
lot of it, kind of the spunkiness, that intelligence kind of comes from there.
But
There's only
coming to that,
one.
sorry to interrupt. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. So Sangamitra, was there a character like Sangamitra in the 7th century?
I really don't know, but I think there must have been. So if you go back in time and read up our history, itihasas,
Yeah.
there are a lot of women who were scholars, right?
Right.
Then Leelavati, for example, I think Bhaskara's
Yes.
daughter wrote
Yeah.
that.
Correct.
Then you had Rudrama Devi in Telangana in the 13th century, I think that was. So there's no reason that there couldn't have been a smart, scholarly woman
Yeah.
who studied at Nalanda in that
Right.
time period. So yeah, so while I don't know of any specific instance, I mean, if you also think about maybe 150 years or 200 years after the events in this book, you had Adi Shankaracharya and Mandana Mishra having their famous debate, and it's
Yes.
the person who was the arbitrator of that debate was Mandana Mishra's wife. So yeah, I
True.
think it's very, very, very easy for me to think of such a character having been there at that point in time.
But talking of mixing various periods to make the story flow, and it does flow very dramatically. Do you? I mean, do you feel was there any documented historical evidence to say that Huan Swang actually visited the place?
Yes, that is there. So I actually looked at the map of Yuan Sang's full journey in India. He went to a lot of places, right? So he came in through the northwest, through Takshashila, came down to Kannauj, then went all the way to the east. From the east, he went down south. He went to Kanchi. He went to Badami. He came up north. And in fact, so I don't want to give it away, but the place where he kind of meets is actually along the path that he's said to have traversed. So I kind of made sure that now it could be that I've taken some creative license in terms of the exact timing when he was there on that path. That bit I will take. If somebody can say, hey, you know what, he didn't go there at that point in time. It was 2 years ago. Fair enough. But I just wanted to kind of show that there was all this churn happening in India at that time. And so I wanted to bring that in.
Right. So, I mean, it did involve a lot of research away from the Cholas that you were doing about other aspects of historical fiction as well. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah. So again, if you think about how we are taught history, it's almost as if North Indian history was very separate from South Indian history.
Correct.
Right? The dynasties of the north were,
for example, don't even know that Cholas is the longest running empire.
Exactly.
For more than 1,000 years, and we talk of Mughal empires and British Empire, 200 years, 300 years, and not even covering the whole country. I mean, here it was covering continents, but no one knows.
They went all the way to Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah. So and Vikram mentioned this, and all the leftist historians went after him for, how dare you mention this? Look, there are 2 lines in my CBSE class 9th textbook, so Vikram is a liar.
Yes.
It's
I saw
crazy.
that.
But it's very frustrating because when you tell the truth and the government doesn't come and say, look, what Vikram is saying is absolutely true and we should be ashamed of not telling our kids more about our own history. Essentially what happens is that a historian or the writers are left to fend for themselves, and more often than not, because they're outside this clique, they get a lot of, Vikram, to be honest with you, I'm sorry, I didn't want to digress to a large extent, but poor fellow has been trolled continuously for the last almost 4 months. In fact, he is, even today, as I say, some crackpot is trolling him even today, mocking him. So just be prepared. All I'm saying is you need to be prepared and have a very thick skin, Arun.
No, that's fine. I actually had a war with one of the trolls on behalf of Vikram. I don't think he even knows that. He was questioning Vikram's his pedigree and why he should be considered a historian and all. And so, but the point is, you're absolutely correct. What I was trying to also say is, during this time period, if you think about it, if you look at the book, right, it goes all the way from Lanka to Harshavardhana in Ujjain and Kannauj. So there was a continuity because Pulikeshi had defeated Harsha in the north, and he had also defeated Mahendravarman in the south, in the Pallava kingdom. So there was a continuity. There was trade happening. There were pilgrimages. Kashi is, like Mark Twain said, it is older than legend and it looked older than everything else. So people have been traveling all over the place. So trade was there. There were pilgrims traveling. It's not as if they were isolated. All the kings knew about each other. And so I've tried to bring in that flavor that, it was not an isolated, Pallava and Chalukya only battle. There were a host of other kings.
Right. And, this is, I think this was very refreshing to see it, even though it is in a historical fiction. I'll tell you why, because not until, I think I heard it first from Sanjeev's. You mentioned Sanjeev Sanyal, a wonderful author, a very dear friend, from one of his lectures, because, the left has always kind of denigrated this idea that there was India, the concept of India before the Brits,
Correct.
So you hear all these crackpots saying that, this idea of India is only 200 years old, 300 years old. There was nothing like, there was no continuity. There was no connection between the north, west, south, east, nothing of that sort. It was through, Sanjeev's lecture, and he talked about the Vishnu Puran, and he talked about how the beautiful concept of the Shakti Peeths, at various places in India, how beautifully connected they were. And that couldn't have happened if Indians didn't know what existed if Indians in Tamil Nadu didn't know what existed in Kashmir. So obviously they knew, and there was this continuum that has been there for 8,000 years now, not just 5,000 years. So I found that utterly refreshing. And as you say, I mean, that has to be emphasized going forward, that India is not just, 200, 300 years old. It is not a figment of a British imagination. We've existed for 8,000 years.
As someone said, Megasthenes didn't call his book South Asia Ka. He called it Indica. and Adi Shankara
Yes.
had his 4 mutts in 4 different corners of India, of Bharatvarsha, actually, not India, of Bharata.
Yeah.
So I think I think that this, what I've tried to do is bring about the fact that there was this continuum all through, and that the Lankan kings used to involve themselves in Indian wars and vice versa. In fact, the Lankan king, there was one Lankan king who had supported the Chalukyas. There was another one who was fighting on behalf of the Pallavas, and then you had Harsha on that side. So I've tried to bring in all those aspects.
Yes. And one interesting thing, obviously, now we live in a very interconnected world, Arun, So once I finished your marvelous book, the one thing that came into mind was, Bahubali was always at the back of my mind. You have, in the North, people are always wanting to, put things on the silver screen. In the South, people have really woken up to it, and Bahubali was, I would say, pioneering in that aspect. The difference, of course, is that here you have real historical facts in the book that weren't quite there in Bahubali. But have you thought of, the rather delicious prospect of, your book becoming a film?
First of all, आपके मुंह में घी शक्कर अगर ये हो गया तो
if the producers of Bahubali are watching, they must read this book. That's all I'll say. Yeah.
Thank you. But, I actually think this would work better as a web series, because in a movie, it might actually lose a lot of the interplay and the interaction. The reason I thought of it as a trilogy is because I wanted to give, I didn't want to condense it into like one book, where you hardly
I was about to ask that you've stolen my question, because I was saying it is daunting as it is for a debut author to think of a thin book. This is a thick book, but you've not only thought of one, it's going to be a trilogy.
Okay,
so please explain. Sorry to repeat that meme. क्या आप job छोड़ने वाले हैं अपना to write a trilogy?
नहीं, वो मैं छोड़ नहीं सकता ना, मेरी खुद की कंपनी है. So, but the thing is, first of all, I actually did not know that it would become a 500-page book, because see, I'm new to this. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was writing it on Word with 12 points.
Right.
Okay, Times New Roman. It came to around 330 pages. At that point in time, I'm like, okay, you know what? 330 pages is not a very long book or large book. Yeah. But when it went to editing, and then after they did all the typesetting and everything, they suddenly said it's like 500 pages. So, but I never thought of the word count or the pages when I was writing it. My only reaction to it was, I wanted to develop characters a little fully. So, if there is I didn't want staccato dialogues. There are a couple of places where, there's one place where this drunken old guy in a tavern, roadside tavern, is, giving his philosophical ideas about God and stuff like that. I think if I'd condensed it into one book, I couldn't have done all that.
Right,
so I just wanted to take my time. And maybe it was a debut author's sense of self-indulgence that I thought I could write a trilogy. But yeah.
Yes. So before I think we, as I said, we'd like to leave 10-15 minutes for audience's questions, but I must ask this question before I throw it open to the audience. So you did mention that Amish's book has inspired you into writing about historical fiction, but generally, who are the authors that have inspired you to write? And I think that would be a very good primer, or a kind of a question to be answered for other debut authors.
Look, there are quite a few, right? And I think when I was writing, I actually realized at one point I wrote a dialogue, and I stopped, and I'm like, God, that sounds so much like this writer's. Okay.
Right.
First, I'm a huge P.G. Woodhouse fan. Okay.
Well,
People
as a South Indian, yes, you can. I mean, I would have been. In fact, I would have walked away had you said, "I don't know who P.G. Woodhouse is." Said, "Shame on you for being a South Indian." But
no,
yeah.
By the way, PG, my only condition before I got married, when I was that my wife should also be a PG Woodhouse fan.
She's not Aunt Agatha. I hope not.
No,
Chews broken bottles.
No, she's not. And conducts human sacrifices at the time of the full moon. No. So Woodhouse.
This doesn't really have a PG in it, right?
No,
so obviously there are other authors who've inspired you.
Yeah. So Woodhouse was just his brand of humor and his wordplay. To me, one of the greatest storytellers is Jeffrey Archer, right? The way he grabs you from the first sentence you read, and there's no way you put his book down. So Jeffrey Archer has had a huge impact. Louis L'Amour, the Western. I'm a huge Louis L'Amour fan. I've got like 50 of his books at home, and so he used to say that I think of myself as a troubadour and an old style minstrel who tells a story. So that's kind of something that impacted me. Alistair MacLean, the way he writes his deadpan humor and the way he writes his action sequences. One of the other huge influences, I don't know if you've heard of this gentleman. He's a person called David Edding, who is a fantasy author, and the way he develops his character, that has had a huge impact on me. In fact, people who know me tell me that, and who know that I've read his books tell me that, hey, I can see that influence in the way you have written.
Right. So it's like a collect. It's like not just one, but there are a collection of.
And then Kalki, the way Kalki used to leave something dangling at the end of every chapter, right? Because you have to remember, Kalki was not writing a book when he wrote his historical fiction. He was serializing it in a weekly magazine. So every
like Dickens,
week,
in fact,
So every week he had to have that little bit of something left hanging, so that the next week people would read
Very
it.
True. Very true.
Yeah. So these
in fact, that is, and when people kind of condensed all the material of Dickens into the books, they realized that Dickens was doing exactly that. And that is why, you move from one chapter to the next. It's like, you are just forced to move. You just can't stop reading. So, and if you look at it, how beautifully it has come to a full circle, because now you have web series you mentioned. You have to, you have to entice the viewer to move on to the next episode. And it's a bit like that, isn't it? I mean, so that is what the origin of binge watching is. That, oh my God, now I have to watch the next episode. I have to watch the next episode. It's a bit
And in our day, we used to do binge reading, right? I mean, you would just flat out read a book in 6 hours or 10 hours or whatever.
Correct.
So I think these have been the influences in a way on my writing. I can't say it's only any one, but I just gave it some thought that these 6 would be the ones who most impacted my style of writing.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Let's take a few questions now, Arun. This one's from Prayag Choraria. I hope I've pronounced this name correct, Prayag. Hi, Anand and Arun. What are your suggestions to improve the interest and importance history gets from school students? And more importantly, they are also taught correct version of history. Arun, would you like to take that?
Well, the correct version of history, I think I have this long-standing grievance with our human HRD ministry that they haven't, someone said we haven't changed even a comma in the last 7 years.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
that
that
is
minister is
ridiculous.
now changed. So the comma
True.
might not have changed, but the minister got changed. But
Minister
the
got
comma is
changed.
still not changed, I would say.
Exactly. I mean, so you know what? I've told my kids, you write what's in the history book to get your marks,
Right.
but I will teach you the correct version of history. So we have all these discussions. So right now that's the only way. I hope and really wish that the government does something about teaching. Even the other day in the Hindu, I saw an article where this person is regurgitating the Aryan invasion theory for some weird reason. I have no idea why, when
Yes.
everybody knows that it's a load of poppycock.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you've thundered on this numerous times on your various TV debates. I've heard you, so you know this better than me.
But I mean, I just wanted to eke this out of you, because don't you find, as a man of science and engineering, STEM rather, it is very frustrating, because in science there are no two versions. If I read a paper that says the B form of DNA is double helix, I mean, I would not come across some other guy saying that, oh, look, no, it is not, it is triple helix. And then there'll be a debate between the two, and they'll come on Twitter and they'll fight. So it doesn't happen like that. So as a scientist, how do you reconcile with people giving you different versions of truth?
It frustrates me no end, right? My
Yes.
issue is, first of all, I believe in Carl Sagan's, his saying that extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof, and the burden of proof rests on the person making the claim. So if you make the claim for something called Aryan invasion, and I refuse to call it a theory, because in our world, a theory is something that is irrefutably proven. It's an Aryan invasion hypothesis at best. Then the burden of proof is on you to prove, that it is there. So it frustrates me no end, but there's very little I can do about it, other than in my new avatar, just write a few more books, hopefully, and people start digging around on their own. They read this and they say, oh, why weren't we talk? Pulikeshi was a great ruler. Okay, the man. I mean, if we read about Harsha being a great ruler, this man went and hammered Harsha. Okay, he made sure Harsha never crossed the Narmada river. So you go to Aihole and Pattadakkal, and you're amazed at the level of the architecture and the temples you see. Why don't we read more about it? It frustrates me as a scientist. It frustrates me no end, as I'm sure it does you. But it's a cross we just have to put up with it till our government actually steps up and does something about
it. Till Rahul Roshan makes a right-wing ecosystem. Not the government, Rahul Roshan. Rahul, if you're hearing this. Priyank just asked a question. I'm sorry, it's disappeared from the ticker. Priyank Jain, I think it was, hi Priyank, he asked a question. Why did you name your book as Nandi's Charge?
The Pallavas used to, if you look at the cover, you have the Varaha or the boar, which was the emblem of the Chalukyas. The Pallavas used to have two emblems. They used to alternately use either the Nandi or the Simha, which is the lion. And since this is the first book, and in a way, Narasimhavarman is trying to fulfill the wishes made to his father, who used the Nandi emblem. So I called it Nandi's Charge. And in the beginning, there is the general says, I'm going to call it Project Nandi, and so we will call it Nandi's Charge.
Right. Interesting. But what would be the part 2 and 3 of trilogy be called?
Tentatively, the part
you haven't done.
No. I tentatively I have. Okay. Part 2 is called Varaha's Vengeance. Part 3 is called Simha's Roar. Now,
nice.
Let's see whether those are the names I stick with, or I go with something else later on. But those are the working titles.
Interesting. This is a nice question from Anish Raj Pandey. Hi, Anish. He asks you, what do you think government should spend more on archaeology? Countries like Egypt use archaeology as attraction for tourism. Now, that's an interesting question, because the more we have understood about our history through archaeology, the more writers have also jumped in and used that material. The problem is that in our country, I would say that we've dug up our country only 10% of what other Western countries have. And as a result, you talked about Mohenjo-daro, you talked about, other areas that have been dug up recently. You have Rakhi, but those are scientific excavations. Almost it would take still some time for writers to come in and use that as a material. So that's an interesting question. I mean, shouldn't the government give more impetus to archaeology? That would help writers as well.
That's a no-brainer, right? I mean, yes, they should. That's a short answer. I think, in a sense, they are starting to do it. If you think about this whole Buddhist circuit that they are now trying to do, right? I think that's a brilliant idea. I think, you can get Buddhists from Southeast Asia all over the place. You make a nice little circuit of Sarnath and Bodh Gaya and all of that. You have yourself a wonderful, wonderful tourist opportunity there. I can think of, along the belt, along the Saraswati River, all those sites, like you said, Rakhi Gari, and all those sites, Lothal, up to Lothal, you could have a train that goes and you could step off and they could have some nice museums. But again, it requires will, political will. Let's see how it goes. Kashi Vishwanath, for example, I'm sure after this, what they have done right now, the tourist footfalls are going to increase tremendously. Leave alone the pilgrims who come there.
But if you visit Nalanda, I don't know if you visited Nalanda.
No,
have you visited Nalanda? No. So if you visit, so how would you feel like getting down at Bakhtiarpur railway station?
It just annoys. I mean, I was telling my daughters the other day that think of we've gone to Dachau, right, in Germany, and I said if we went to Dachau and we got down at Hitler station. Yeah, that's the equivalent of us going to Nalanda and getting down at Bakhtiarpur station. Yeah. So that my mind, I'm just so annoyed at that we still haven't managed to change it.
Here's a question from London News. It says, since there is very little information available about the topic you have chosen, was it easy or difficult to write this book? I think we've already covered that. You mentioned that it took you 10 years. But let me extend that question to now book 2 and 3. Have you started writing them or not yet?
Yeah, I started writing book 2. So my resolution this year was to finish both the books this year. I don't know whether that's feasible, at least my writing part of it. I started writing book 2. But look, information cuts both ways, right? The good thing, if you have a lot of information, you know a lot more about what you're writing. But if you don't have a lot of information, you can give your creative instincts a lot of rein. So you're not, constrained by too many things. So I think it kind of cuts both ways.
Okay, here is Vandana Bhardwaj. She asks you, hey Arun, is there anything in your novel that is true, but it bothered you to fictionalize it? Good or bad? And it is the Vandana this side. So obviously she knows you.
Yeah, she's a dear friend.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything there that bothered me to fictionalize it, because the details are actually very sketchy. Okay, of that period, all you know is King A defeated King B in battle C. Okay. And you know that King X of the Pandyas and King Y of from the Lanka, they supported him. So what do you do with that? I mean, you just have to make up everything. So from a historical fiction perspective, what I'd like to say is there's a lot of creative thinking in terms of the events other than the main battles, and we haven't even come to the main battle. So while there are characters who are real, everything else pretty much is my own imagination in that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I found that question by Vandana to be very probing psychologically. I think it's a very wonderful question, because what immediately came to my mind was, when I read her question, was Naipaul's, one of the most beautiful novels I have read, is The Enigma of Arrival. It's just absolutely, it's a masterpiece. not many people know of it, unfortunately, but that's the way masterpieces go. But there, everything is actually true. So it is completely non-fiction, and yet Naipaul has fictionalized it, as Vandana said. So it bothered Naipaul. The events that he describes were actually true, because there, he goes to prostitutes, he beats up his wife, and all those things are there, that are true, that happened. Naipaul did them, but in the novel, somebody else is doing it. You know what I mean? So that's a writer's license that he took. I don't know. There are ways of saying whether it was fair or unfair or whatever it is, but the fact is that he did it. It doesn't in any way take away the beauty of his prose or something, but it is. Would you call that cheating in a way? That here is something that actually happened. It is true. It is non-fiction, and you have fictionalized it because at some level you are scared of disclosing it.
No, I think so. I would think of it as Naipaul telling everybody else a story of what happened. So if you and I are sitting and I know a story about something that happened in reality, and I tell it to you, that's not something that's cheating, right? I might obfuscate because I don't want specific names to come out or get people to get hurt. But there's nothing wrong in what obviously he did, and he's such a great writer. From my point of view, in terms of this book, there's one place where I wanted to show. Actually, there are 2 or 3 different places where I wanted to show the brutality of war. Right? In our typically when we read history or when he won a glorious victory in the war. No war has a glorious victory. People die. People's heads are chopped up. There are women who bear the brunt of it oftentimes, who are living nearby. So I kind of wanted to show that brutality come through. And there's one particular passage which it was a little difficult for me to write, but I still went through to write it, and I had to eventually tone it down. It was actually way more brutally written than the way it appeared later on. Post editing, I had to tone. In the editing process, the feedback I got was, yeah, this is all great, you've written well, but I don't think you want to put it out like this. So yeah.
I think we're running out of time. I'll take one question. It's from Rakshank Savadati. He ends his question wonderfully. He says, Mysore Park Zindabad. So thank you very much, Rakshank. But the question he asks is, don't you think history that is written in India is more Delhi-centric? I think Rakshank, Arun did answer that question. He believes that. Here is Dr. Gautam, who asks you, which historical figure has inspired both of you the most and why? So
why don't you start, Anand?
Yeah, I mean, it requires. In fact, I asked this question to Jesai, expecting him to take as long as we are taking, but the fellow just said Tilak.
Okay.
Which was so. But that's Jesai, is a genius. In my case, it's very difficult to say. I would say. Again, this is very tough. I mean, there are people who've inspired me who are actually, not quite historical. Like they're not hundreds of years, before the present times. I would say Charles Darwin is one. The sheer, the beauty of the philosophy. So I would say Charles Darwin comes to mind. But there are many. Ambedkar is another. But is he really historical in that? In that sense. Kalidas is one, but I've been inspired by very interesting his aura more than because I really don't, even though I studied Sanskrit for 2 or 3 years, it was basically, as you said, just to pass exams. So I wish I knew Sanskrit to appreciate Kalidasa. So these are the 3 people I can think of hand. But Arun, who are in your list?
I think so if you take the most recent, you can't call them historical yet. They've just been gone a few years. I would say Richard Feynman and Carl Sagan. So to me, I've been, so they have shaped my worldview a lot. Very recently, I've started to gain a lot of appreciation for, they are historical figures, for both Rama and Krishna. in different ways. Now, I must make this claim that I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in the a personal God or anything that exists. In that sense, you and I are pretty much on the same side of this thing. Right. But just the fact that so with Rama, it is the man went through immense, moral questions or circumstances, and he never wavered from that one dharma that he had. Okay. Yeah. So my appreciation for dharma actually has been more recent over the last 4 or 5 years. With Krishna, it is how he was able to clearly, real politic and the way he went about doing it. That was very, very impressive for me. So yeah, I think these would be the 4.
Right. In my case, I mean, if we have to mention the gods, then it is Shiva. Okay. Purely for the fact that he is so innocent and fallible, and it's just amazing, the kind of things that he does. He gets into trouble, but then gets out of it. People come and help him. He has an army, and he loves, all sorts of things. He goes on, helps people, but he doesn't know half the time what he's doing. Gets into issues, gets angry. He is a whole gamut of emotions, I really absolutely adore Shiva in that sense. Awesome. I think we have ended this session. Mayuri says congratulations to you. But before I go, I have to, again, I'm still reading the book, and I must say it is very interesting. Well, Arun would like to thank Mayuri, and so would I. Thank you so much. Before I end, Arun, I must ask you this, because there is something as a writer that has truly inspired me. It's just one quote out of hundreds of thousands of quotes and passages. There is one that has left this indelible impression on me, and that was by Barthes. And he said something which is truly profound and acted as an inspiration for me. He said, the birth of the reader is the death of the writer. What he meant was that if you start writing for your readers, that look, I'm not going to write this because this segment is not going to enjoy this, or they might be offended by it, and he said that is the death of you. Correct. How are you at all worried by what you write, how it might be perceived by different segments of your readers? No. I'm very honest about the way I write. So think about it this way, Anand. You and I would probably be considered to be part of the right wing, correct? Yes. And yes, because of what you do and what I have written, both of us, Sanghis. Both of us don't believe in a God. So does that cancel us from certain segments? I don't care. My point is, if I'm writing a book, I want to be as honest about what I'm writing. As long as now I have taken on board suggestions where they say, hey, this is not historically accurate or something, I'm perfectly okay changing that. No, that's different. Yeah, what I meant was, I mean, you mentioned Jeffrey Archer. Yeah. You mentioned a few other names, and they have publicly stated that their writing is now very often based on the reader's appreciation of a kind of style or the kind of stories, or so I'm saying with fame, and fame will come to you. It's not that it's not come right now. I'm just saying, not being patronizing. Fame, tremendous fame will come to you. Would that change you? Would you be worried about whether your readers are going to accept what your next novel or not? Look, I can't predict the future. I'm a computational guy, so I know that anybody who claims they can predict is trying to pull a fast one on you. But I really hope it doesn't. Okay, all I can say is I hope it doesn't. It doesn't change the way I write. And if fame comes, that's different. But I hope I keep writing what I believe in, not what I think. Look, I can understand Jeffrey Archer is still doing it. It's like Rajnikant, right? If Rajnikant, if you take his early Tamil movies and the brilliant actor he was, later on he kind of became captive to his own aura and that superstar status. So I kind of understand why he does what he does.
But hey, there's a long way to go for that. So I'll pass that question when, maybe the next book, when you and I talk about it, we will.
Yes.
We will.
Wonderful. Well, Arun, it's been an absolute pleasure, and all I can say this is,
likewise,
for all the viewers and the people who've already started reading it, please go ahead and buy Nandi's Charge. It's a wonderful book. It's a great attempt by Arun, and there's more to come. So he would keep you tied to this for the second and the third in the trilogy. Thanks so much, Arun, and
thank you. Thanks,
it was an absolute pleasure to interact with you. And thank you to Nehru Center, and thanks very much, Amish, for having us and giving us this platform for this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
all the
Anand.
best.
Thanks to the Nehru Center, and thanks, Amish, for enabling this.
Thank you.